Karen Bigman is a certified sex educator and life coach and the host of Taboos to Truth, Life and Sex After 50. Spoiler alert, that's me. I'm in my 50s now, so I'm looking forward to learning some new skills from Karen. Through her podcast and coaching, she helps midlife adults navigate intimacy, desire and identity with honesty and empowerment, whether it's dating after divorce, sex during menopause, or exploring kink in communication. Karen creates space for conversations that are often left in the shadows and brings them gently into the light. That's a lot of stuff. You're very welcome. Thank you so much for spending some time with me.
Thank you for having me.
Gosh, now I just wanted to take you back a little bit, if that's okay, and get a feel for what your teenage and formative years were like. Do you think the person then would recognize who you are today?
It's funny that you should say that. My mom used to say she was always afraid when I came back from college that I was gonna get off the plane with pink hair. So the irony is that it wasn't until I was in my late 50s that I started dyeing my hair pink. So I think I wasn't that I was quite repressed so much as I was. My parents were Eastern European, and there were just certain social norms and ways that you had to behave. And so what I'm experiencing now is all the stuff that I wouldn't allow myself because I was afraid of my parents or afraid of what society would say. Where now I don't give a shit.
So were you comfortable with your body, your sexuality when you were late teens, early 20s, or was it taking a bit of time to get to that point?
I didn't have a lot of partners. I mean, I had a serious boyfriend in high school, and then I got married, and I met my ex-husband when I was 25, so it was fairly young. So I had a few partners, but I hadn't had the experience of. I kind of, in some ways, was envious of my friends who had slept with a lot of guys or women, and who had lots of experiences, because I always wanted that. And of course, once you're married, it's like, is this it for life? Which luckily it wasn't, but I kind of knew like that I missed that part of me. In terms of body, that's like a whole other story, because I mean, I don't know a woman who doesn't have body image issues, but I definitely have had issues. My daughter's a social worker. She says, "Mom, you don't have an eating disorder, but you have disordered eating." So I've always felt I'm fat, I'm, what women say, but I definitely have issues with that do, or, less so now, but definitely did affect, how I'm looking when I'm making love with somebody in the bedroom, Yeah.
So from having that relatively traditional background of upbringing from East European parents, from getting married to somebody you met when you're 25, it feels like a big step to go into the space you are today and occupy that as someone advocating for conversations and the truth about intimacy. How did you end up where you are today?
I think I started the journey before I knew I was starting the journey. And what actually happened about 10 years ago. So I'm actually 62 now. When I was in my early 50s, I got divorced, and I started seeing somebody. And of course, both of us had been in long marriages, and towards the last few years, we were fairly sexless. And so we went wherever we could, we would, literally, like pulling over on a street in New York City and doing it in the back of the car. I mean, I would not push that on anybody at our age, but it was what we wanted to do. We were able to do it. And I started having issues. I was on hormone replacement therapy, traditional estrogen and progesterone. But I started having issues orgasming. And I went to my gynecologist, and she suggested it was in my head with all the emotional turmoil of the divorce, and eventually referred me to a sexual medicine practice. And that, the first time I went there, I think, was the beginning of this journey. They pair you with it was a nurse practitioner. I don't know what the system is there, but it's not a medical doctor, but as close as you can, and a nurse and a sex therapist. And that was the appointment. And the sex therapist, we ended up being kind of friendly. She's like a Dr. Ruth, a younger version of Dr. Ruth. And they start to ask you like all these questions that you're kind of embarrassed, like have you ever orgasmed before? What actually happens? Like all these questions. And then they said, have you ever used a vibrator? And I'm like completely embarrassed and turning red. And they said, well, why don't you? They took out like a little bullet and said, well, why don't you try this? And literally sent me to the exam room number 2 and said, go try the vibrator. And it took me like less than 5 minutes. I'm like, all right, this just changed my world. So that began the conversation. And I also found out I was testosterone deficient, so they gave me a prescription for testosterone. And I would go back regularly, and we would have these great conversations. The sex therapist, her name is Dr. Batsheva Marcus, and we would just have all these great conversations, and it became very easy for me to have. I was always somebody who could talk about anything, but it wasn't like you talked about it in public. So she eventually came to visit my house and met a bunch of my friends and spoke on painful sex for women. And she also showed them all these vibrators. And so the conversation began. So that was like 10 years ago. Fast forward 4 years ago, I moved out here to Orange County. I'm bi-coastal. And I found people here like so ashamed about talking about sex. I was in a book club meeting and people were mortified that there was a sex scene in the book. And I was like, seriously, folks, like I know I'm a New Yorker, but you guys are like in your 40s, 50s, 60s, you can't say sex. So I just started to think of this, and simultaneously the conversation around menopause started to get much louder here. I believe it started a little earlier in the UK, but people were talking about menopause. So the first thing I did was say, okay, I'm just going to try putting this out there and see what happens. And I just threw up a podcast, just started recording the audio. And I got really excited and interested in it. I certified as a menopause coach. And then I discovered the Sexual Health Alliance and did their certification for sex education. And that just opened up so much for me, because all the judgments I'd had all these paradigms that I put relationships and people in, I just like got blown away. I'm like, wow, like this is such an amazing community. And so that was a long-winded way of saying like that's how I got here. And I've never been more aligned. I mean, I've been a computer programmer. I'm like a techie at heart. I've been a divorce coach. I've been a systems consultant, and like this is my purpose.
It's very obvious that you've lived everything yourself and you've experienced it all yourself, which I think is, yeah, something obviously men can't do, particularly with menopause. I mean, and I do struggle a lot with the way we talk about menopause in the UK. So in the UK, I'm sure it's the same, similar there. So UK is somebody goes to the doctor when they're feeling symptoms or they're in sort of perimenopause, and the doctor pretty much says, okay, well, you can go on HRT or not. Here's the HRT that we give. Right, there you go. Here's some patches, here's some tablets. And we're talking to girlfriends and my partner and my wife, etc. There's very little discussion about what a sex life might look like during, following menopause. And I think for a lot of people, which is terrible, the menopause almost feels like the full stop to sex. Like, right, okay, sex life, period, menopause. Okay, and it feels like it doesn't feel like it carries through. And how do we get people to understand more about how our sex life can be more adventurous, more exciting once we get to menopause, and not see that as something that stops women feeling sexy and desirable and wanting to have sex?
Well, a few things.
That's a big question, sorry.
Yes, no, a few things. Starting with in the United States, it's changing, but when a woman goes to the doctor and says, I'm having menopause symptoms, they say, go home, have a glass of wine, here's some antidepressants. There's nothing wrong with you, tough it out. I mean, there's a lot of doctors that still do that. So the fact that one can actually get HRT, that if it's true that they can get it that easily, I think we should all move to the UK. But putting that aside, I think what I'm learning lately is that women do not prioritize their own pleasure. And it goes even to, or even their own health. I have spoken to so many friends, especially the ones that are now in their 60s, and they're like, they were not on hormone therapy. And I'm like, well, are you using vaginal estrogen? Because vaginal estrogen, there's a bunch of studies now that show that it does not cause cancer. It keeps the vulva moist, and it helps with urinary tract infections. It makes for better orgasms, for less pain. There's so many reasons, and everyone should be using it, right? And they'll say yes, and they won't do anything. I mean, my girlfriend, finally, it took 1.5 years. I was talking to her about it. She came to stay with me, and we literally got online together, and I was showing her exactly what it was. Women just say, like, and I know she's sexually active with her husband, but other women just say, you know what, like, either I'm going to do it for him and it's going to be uncomfortable, but he'll take the garbage out, or you know what, I don't really need sex anymore. So I think there's like that whole contingent of women that just say like, it's just not that important to me. And some men too, but I think for the most part it happens. I almost think that it's when you get closer to 60 that you start to see you become more sexual. And I don't know if that's because you're postmenopausal. Um, and if you are, newly single in midlife, that
Mm.
often changes how you feel about sex. So I think it's a combination of factors. I think society tells us that you're no longer fertile, therefore you're no longer, sexual. And I think we're seeing some women. I mean, I've even heard, I think I talked about this very early in my podcast. Jane Fonda commented, she's in her 80s now, and how she had sex with all these people, but now she's, perfectly fine with all her girlfriends and she doesn't need sex anymore. And whoever it was, it might have been Julia Louis-Dreyfus interviewing her, and she said, "Well, would you be with another partner now?" And she's like, "Oh, I wouldn't want them to see my body." Like women just shut it down. And I mean, my God, Jane Fonda's like the
As I say,
sexiest
Jane
woman,
Fonda,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
so it's societal, and I hope it's changing as more and more women are we're seeing the Oprahs and the Mel Robbins and all these women who are louder voices in middle life, but it's unfortunate.
Mm. And I think a lot of that goes way back into our teenage years. I mean, even you sort of saying that gosh, discovered a bullet vibrator when you were in the last sort of decade or so. I just don't think men or women really spend time exploring and understanding their own bodies and their own pleasure. And there's some crazy statistics, something like 34% of women have never looked at their own vulva in a mirror or something. Whereas for men, it's pretty much there. It's
Right.
hanging down there. You are obsessed with it. You can't avoid it. But for women, it's like you say, it's either I don't need sex in my life, or the sex that I have is to sort of keep my partner happy, which sort of feels that they haven't discovered what good sex looks like or feels like. So if you have good sex, you want to have more of it, I think.
Absolutely.
And I don't know why it's such a psychological thing. I think a lot of it must be down to that shame thing that we still carry, because we don't really get educated in sex education in the UK is still pretty much avoid STDs.
And don't
Here's how
get
to put a
pregnant.
condom on a
Yeah.
banana.
Yeah.
Always handy. And there's a little bit about consent now, which obviously is a great thing. But that's really it. There's not much or anything about kink or intimacy or sexuality or same-sex relationships. None of those things. So if you have what you might think is a kink that nobody else in the world has, first of all, you're wrong because somebody else has it. But yeah, you just feel embarrassed and ashamed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, my own, I laugh because my mom was in school to get her master's in psychology when I was in high school, or she'd already become a psychologist. And my sex education was my dad just like, don't get pregnant. That's the worst thing that could ever happen to you. And my mom left a little pamphlet by my bed on what they now call STIs, but was venereal disease back in the
Yeah.
day. And that was my sex education. And so we're taught like, don't get pregnant, don't get an STI, and that's it. And oh, by the way, sex is man goes inside, PIV, penis and vagina,
Yeah.
he ejaculates,
Yeah.
the act is over, everything's done. So we don't learn about it. So what we don't know, we don't know. We don't try. And I think that's sort of the beautiful thing of being single again in midlife, because you get to say like, wait a minute, was that all there was? Like you have new partners, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, we could do it differently. We could do something differently. We could try different things. And it's been interesting because there's still some people that like there's a script. I mean, as
Yeah.
heterosexual people, I don't know if you're heterosexual or not. I'm making an
Yeah.
assumption, but I am. And there's a script that we have in the bedroom. Maybe there's a little kissing, perhaps a little oral, but end of day, he's going to go inside of me, and that'll be it. And maybe I'll have an orgasm, maybe I won't, but we're done. That's it. When you're kinky, when you're gay or on the spectrum or whatever, you got to explain what's going to happen. You have to have a conversation. Do you like to be on top? Do you like to be on the bottom? Do you like this kind of penetration? Do you not? Do you want to use toys? Are you okay with impact? Are you okay with handcuffs? Like, all these questions are going to be discussed before you get into the bedroom. So you're like, that could be a really amazing experience. And I think that like the answer may be somewhere in the middle, especially if you're starting with people that are really vanilla and have never tried anything outside of, lights off, missionary position. But I think it's sort of just even opening it up in a way that doesn't have to be so extreme like kink can make such a difference. Reading erotica, watching porn or ethical porn, ideally, just bringing in sensation play. Oh gosh, I have a master class, sex education class. I have a whole list of things that you can do. Adding lube, my God, it's like the simplest tool. Just
Yeah.
like we all need that, and using that everywhere. Like there's so many little things, and I think it's like if you get to try it once, then all of a sudden you might go, oh, that was kind of fun. But if you've never tried it and you don't know about it, how are we going to teach you?
Yeah. And then there's two things there. One, I think if we could replace the word sex with pleasure, I think that would be a huge step forward, because you can get a huge amount of pleasure from just looking at somebody, from brushing somebody's hair, from giving somebody a massage, from holding hands, whatever. But I think because the way we use the words, we use the word foreplay. So this is what happens before we have the penetration.
Right.
And it's sort of, what if that was it? There, what if that was the pleasure? Oh. And that's the challenge. I think a lot of time that men and women might think, I just don't feel like having sex today. Well, that's okay. There's so much more you can do so that pleasure one another. I think that's kind of a obvious thing to look at. And then I think the second thing is you said really, really important, is that people look at, I don't know, people that might be in the BDSM community, joking community, oh gosh, I could never do anything like that. But they're the people that have the greatest communication skills. And I've talked to people in the community and say that so much of the erotic element that we have is our negotiation. And I'll talk about what's a yes, what's a no, what's a maybe, what's our safe words, all those things. Whereas, exactly as you say, we get into a routine. It's like, right, so kissing, yep, nibble nipples, yep, okay, a bit of oral, yep, okay, right, penetration. God, done those things, right? We've had sex.
Right.
And that's nothing like it is in places where people want to experiment more. Again, it comes back to that fear or shame, I think, which we try and overcome.
I also think it's our definition of sex. Like one of the questions I always ask my guests is, what's your definition of sex? Because I think that I had Dr. Rachel Czar on a couple, I don't know, maybe it was last year. She's a sex therapist, and she talked about core play. And then I've heard the term outer course. And I think if we stop thinking of sex as intercourse, I mean, we consider losing our virginity having intercourse. Like if we just think about even having not sex, just lying there and not saying, okay, no genital touching, like making games of it, making it fun and playful. I think that also helps couples who really have like lost the spark or have, just stopped having sex, like trying things that my girlfriend just told me, her and her husband went to sex therapy a couple of years ago. And that was what, the therapist had told them to start some kind of like touching game, whatever. She goes, and we were just laughing. We couldn't do it. We were laughing. I'm like, that was the point. Because it didn't have to be this like serious exercise of we need to get here. It was like, just, that's what connects you.
How did you know when you got divorced in your 50s? How did you know that you wanted something different and you wanted to explore more?
I connect, very cliche. I reconnected with a guy from business school that we reconnected on Facebook like right afterwards. So I started a relationship with him. I can't say that I was, and I am not in the lifestyle, a kinky lifestyle. I've explored more partners and different things, but I think it was just when we were together, it was the freedom to be myself. Where my ex, he's a nice guy, but very buttoned up. And when we did have sex, it was decent, but it wasn't like I could ever scream or, just say dirty talk or things like that. Like I just started trying that and it felt like, wow, this is really fun. So I think it was giving myself permission to just be and say what I feel like saying. And you don't like it? I have a new guy I'm dating now, and I like dirty talk. I just think it makes it really fun. And even that, you can have consent around what words do you like, what words can I use,
Yeah.
what words make. But we haven't had that conversation. But we were in bed, and I was saying things, and I think he was sort of embarrassed. And I'm like, hey, I like dirty talk. Like, this is what I like to do. So like, and I think he liked it, but it was a little bit jarring for him. So just like be yourself. And I think the truth is that once somebody, like now, he tries it a little bit because I think he's more comfortable with it. As soon as you kind of suggest something to somebody, even if they say absolutely hard no, or I would never, now it's in their head. It's like, well, maybe I would never go to a BDSM club. But if you want to get a feather and start bringing it into the bedroom, I'll try that.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny, isn't it? Even with dirty talks, I was talking to a lady a few weeks ago who's she's submissive, and she was saying that she was with a partner, and being called a slut or a whore or whatever, she was absolutely fine with. And he called her pathetic, and she just, something within her really froze, and she really froze up. So I think yeah, even having that discussion about, well, what are the words that you use? Do you want to be humiliated? Do you want to be sort of sexualized? Do you want to be what are the things that you want us to talk about? I think you do see, and some films are very amusing. You do see people that try and talk dirty for the first time, and it's almost a literal car crash. What are you saying? Just something on top of the head bursts out, and you think, yeah, it's you got to get in with it. But I think it's fabulous being able to talk. I mean, a lot of people have sex in silence.
Well, the other thing though, I think I just did a reel or something on this. The other thing though that is a little bit of a challenge at our ripe age, certainly in mine, I call it dirty yelling because they can't always hear you.
It's a what? What was it?
That's true. That's exactly like
bitch,
the moment is lost, right?
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah. That's brilliant. Yeah. You got to, if you're going to say it out loud. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
One of the things I guess that we reached, and I'm getting to this point now in my 50s, that my children are about to leave home. So my daughter's going off to college in the fall, hopefully. She gets her results next Thursday, so fingers crossed. And my son's 15, so it won't be too long before he goes. And I sort of had this feeling that suddenly I'm going to look at my wife, my wife's going to look at me and think, shit, it's just the two of us. Gosh. Those times before children when we walked around the house naked or had sex on the sofa or whatever, it's like, oh gosh, do we do that again? Do we reignite?
Absolutely.
How do we? Because that should be the best time, shouldn't it? Really, you're both comfortable, you're both relaxed, you both, yeah, you know who you are. You've been together for 20, 30 years, whatever. And I feel it either goes, you look at each other and think, gosh, how have we lasted together? We've only had the children and keeping us together. That's been it.
Right.
Or you look at each other and think, wow, what do we do now? How when people come to you in that whole empty nester thing, what do you recommend? How do you embrace it as opposed to fear it?
I think it depends on what the situation is. I mean, the first you mentioned, like how did we stay together? We did it for the kids. We're not meant to be together, and I think that's that often happens, and that's when it happens. That's when it happens for a lot of people, because they are finally seeing each other again after many years. But in the case of a couple that really loves each other, but their intimacy has just kind of waned because other things have been priority. Yeah. Starts with the conversation. I love the yes, no, maybe lists. I have one in my course. A lot of people have them. You can just download them from some of the sex educators out there. And just even doing something like that, going through that together with your partner. There's a website that I can give your listeners a discount code. It's called Arya.fyi, ARYA.fyi. And they kind of, not quite gamifies it, but each partner puts their own wants and needs in it, and it spits out it sends a box every month, and it also can, like, if you're having total disconnects, they might hook you up with a therapist to talk to online to help be able to communicate better. So there are ways, if you have to want it, you have to both want it, and it starts with communication, but it doesn't have to be like, okay, honey, let's go to a kink club or a sex club now that the kids are gone. It might be, let's swing. Yeah. I mean, it might be, but that also has, it's not without its perils if you're going to do it. But I think it's first wanting to be together and then gently moving into this new space. And sometimes people have been in the space, they just don't let the kids know.
Yeah.
So
And when you're, we don't all live in mansions. So when you're in a bedroom and one kid's room is one side, one kid's room is the other side, it's you're not necessarily going to be quite as we're not going to be shouting out.
yes.
You're not dirty yelling, believe me. Yeah, but I think it's kind of silly in a way. The person we know the best and have spent the most time with, we often find it very hard to have that conversation. So I think sometimes we start off our sex life and we have a relationship and it's good if we do what we're doing, and it's like, say, you fall into that pattern, and then if you want to say, well, look, gosh, I'd really like to role play, or I'd really like to, yeah, sometimes it's just hard to even start the conversation. I think one thing you fear either being laughed at or the other person being repulsed by what you're going to say. So how do you create this space for that conversation? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think the first thing is gently.
Yeah.
Don't go in full force, like I said, and say, honey, I think it's time for us to go to a sex club.
Yes.
Unless you think your partner like that was on their mind too. We used to have really, at the convent, we used to have really great intimacy. I miss it. Why don't we try to get it back and let's see what we can do? And it could be the two of you going to a sex therapist together to help you kind of rekindle. It could be, I mean, Esther Perel is unbelievable. Like, she really is great at talking about how relationships can evolve. It's, again, like things like the yes, no, maybe list. It's trying something small, having the conversation. And yeah, I told you, we talked about before, I was a divorce coach for 5 years, and I used to say, and I still say this, there are two conversations that are really difficult for people to have. One is money and the other is sex.
Yeah.
And if you can talk about those two things, then, and if you're good at the money conversation, just substitute sex for for the word money and just do it, just because it's only you who's going to suffer without it. And don't be judgmental. That would be the other really critical thing. If your partner says something that sounds like, or tells you like a fantasy that sounds absolutely horrific to you, it's like, doesn't mean they want to do it, but it also is respect that is a fantasy that they have, and just accept that that's what it is, without judging them for having it, because then they'll never have that conversation with you again.
That's the big thing I think a lot of people don't truly understand, is that fantasy, by the very nature of the word, it isn't necessarily something somebody wants to do. There's a huge growth in the sort of fantasy romance novels now, where people are intimate with dragons or werewolves. And people don't necessarily want to have sex with a dragon, but maybe they want to be taken and chained up and whatever else. There's elements of the story, and I think it's getting to that point, so people don't feel, oh my gosh, your fantasy is to have sex with somebody else, and it's not. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it's to role play meeting you in a hotel bar, and we don't know each other, and we go off together into the hotel, and the next day we don't talk about it again. It's interpretation, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, it's being playful. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the woman was talking about how her and her husband, he came up with the fantasy of, let's pretend we're doing a jewelry heist. I mean, it doesn't even have to be sexual. It could just be something totally sneaky and devilish that just brings it back, right? It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It can be something wild and crazy, but it doesn't have to be. And in fact, I think, one of the things that you have to be careful of, people always have this fantasy. A lot of heterosexual men, particularly, have a fantasy of a threesome. And some women too. And I think like that often is the first thing that people try, is to bring a third person in. And that's a really dangerous thing to do without proper conversations and education and consent and what's going to happen. So that I would say like that would be like a bigger step than simply
Yeah.
having a conversation about a fantasy about a threesome.
Yeah.
Pretend there's a third person in the bed.
Absolutely. You're blind. Yeah. Have one of you blindfolded. Have your partner knock on the door and pretend to be somebody else. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's funny, isn't it? Because threesome almost seems to be okay, we'll try this now. Without any real consideration. Christ, I wouldn't know. There's too many arms, too many legs. What, Christ, God knows what I'll do with it all. It's no, far too much. But I do think people, see it as something to go to. And you hear so many stories about, how they don't end well. I'm sure sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. What are
Well,
your feelings on? What are your feelings on ethical non-monogamy?
I think whatever floats your boat.
Mhm.
You know, as long as the key is consent. I
Yes.
had a friend that when her marriage ended, she went on the apps,
Hmm.
was looking for someone who was open, and what she was finding is that many of the men were saying they were in open marriages, but she later found out they weren't.
The
So I
wives
think
didn't know.
yes, and I'm sure she was looking for men at the time. I'm sure there are
Mhm.
women that do that as well. So I think consent. I think there's so many, it's such a spectrum of ethical there's ethical non-monogamy, there's everything should be ethical non-monogamy, but there's just opening your relationship, there's being in polyamorous. My episode that just came out yesterday, I interviewed a woman who has been married and polyamorous, and it's fascinating. I mean, they raise kids together, they have boyfriends and girlfriends, and they are happy family, all one big happy family, and they have extras, and for some people that can be very healthy. Some people just find it. I mean, I've thought about it. I've been single quite a while now, and I want one person. I've been traditionally a serial monogamist,
Mhm.
but there's a part of me that's saying, well, if I can't find one person to fulfill, my intimacy needs and my companionship needs, maybe it is different people with each having their role. I don't know if I could be in that kind of situation. Most people who are looking for a monogamous partner will say, like, no way, I couldn't do that. So I don't know. I think it's great if people want to do it. I think that there are a lot more people. Certainly, my kids are. What are they? Gen Z. What's 20,
Mhm.
29 and 33. My older one has talked a lot about. He's a couple of friends that have been in open relationships, open marriages, and often it's one partner is bi, and so they do it for that reason, or they just decided like it works for them.
Mm.
So again, as long as both parties are consenting to whatever it is, it may be one person doesn't partake and lets the other, because maybe I have
Yeah.
one friend whose wife is not sexual anymore. She doesn't want to have sex, and he's very kinky. And he has a third and a fourth, and he goes out to Palm Desert and goes to all these kink parties, and she's happy to be home and do her own thing. So as long as and I actually lunched with him and one of his partners and his wife, and I said, like, aren't you jealous? And she said, I'm fine as long as they don't sleep in the same bed together. That was
Mhm.
her boundary. So it can work. Would I want to know my partner was doing that personally? I don't think so, but if you did, go for it.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I've talked to people on the podcast before that are in ethical non-monogamous, and some people are very much they want to know everything that happened with the other person. Some people I don't want to know anything that happened at all. One person said, and it's funny you talked about money. I said, "Oh gosh, it just becomes quite complicated because you've got to talk about finances and if it's a child, you both sort of co-parenting. One person's working, one person isn't, and it becomes quite it's not just about the sex; it's about the lifestyle. Really, how do you fund the lifestyle? What happens if one of you wants to break off the non-monogamous relationships? Even in non-monogamous, it's you are committed non-monogamous. You're not necessarily just doing it on each each week a different person. So it becomes yeah,
You might
that's
be.
reasonable in some ways. Quite complicated. It could be absolutely, yeah, but yeah.
Again, as long as everybody's happy about it and doing it, and sometimes you try and it doesn't work, and it's like I
Mhm.
thought I was okay with it, but I really can't handle it, and I don't want
Mm,
you doing it anymore, and then that's a choice.
mm.
But I think if you are unhappy, it's like, what is the source of the unhappiness? Is the source the sex sucks and your partner is never going to get better and you want to have good sex? Is the source that you love your partner but you just can't figure out, he has erectile dysfunction, you have menopause
Yeah.
symptoms, and you just need to figure out ways around that? Or is it that you're both truly like adventurous and ready to break
Mm,
out and try something new? I mean, but like you said, how do you have to start the conversation somewhere?
mm. I do want to make sure people find your website, taboo2truth.com, which I really loved. And it's very pink and it's very informative. And you should be really proud of it. I think it's a really, really good website. And I just wondered if you could, not tab by tab, but just talk it through a little bit and talk to us a little bit about the pleasure playbook that you're very kind enough to offer as a free resource to people.
Gosh, I created that a while ago. I don't remember
You need to
exactly
update
what's
it.
in it, but I think I mentioned probably this. What I would love to talk about though is,
Mhm.
is I did create. I put a lot of energy in the spring into this. I call it Hotter, Wiser, Wilder Adult Sex Education Masterclass, and it's 6 modules, and I really break it down into your sexual beliefs, what's going on with your body, how to, communication tools, things you can do, and then I have a final section on dating and sex for people who are single. And to me, that was like the second labor of love, because it just has so much information in it that is in a non-threatening way, like get one and share it with your partner kind of thing. I think that probably is the most resources. The podcast, Taboo to Truth, Life and Sex After 50, that's of course available on all platforms. I have quite a bit of information on YouTube as well. Instagram.
And just on a masterclass then. So is that online,
Yes,
interactive?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's available on my website, and I'm happy to give your guests a discount code. It's at the moment it's $97 US. So we can talk about something to put in the show notes for anybody interested. And the podcast has got a ton right now. Everything is out there. I will eventually move to a paid model probably next year. So listen now, because it won't all be available next year. And I'm getting kind of racier and trying to. I feel like there's a lot of information and a lot of community for women, but there isn't a lot for men. I know I'm very pink. I might have to go more purple or blue if we're going to gender colors. But I feel like men have a lot harder time having conversations. Whether it's the conversation that is about their wife who is going through menopause, or it's their own coming into their own issues as they age, and just having this feeling like nobody's going through what I'm going through, and offering them a place to say, like, no, you're not alone. Like, men go through stuff too. Men have the same, in fact, some of the hormonal changes that happen to men have the same symptoms as what happened to women. So I'm trying to create that space for men who don't have that community.
I think that'd be really powerful. I think. Yeah, I mean, just talking personally, it's one of mine now, mid-50s, and yeah, sometimes I can't get an erection. Sometimes my erections don't last that long. So it's not as rock hard as I remember, maybe falsely being in my my previous part of my life. You think, gosh, because if we think of sex as being penis and vagina, and you can't do that for some reason, one day or 1 week, whatever, you feel like you failed.
Yep.
And it's not something that you necessarily. Blokes don't talk about that to other blokes. They really don't. It's not something we sort of talk about down the pub or at football or whatever. And because we're supposed to perform almost, aren't we? And I think a lot of men, in particular, let me start that again. So I think a lot of young men, maybe 12, 13, is their first time they come across porn. And
it's younger
porn
than
nowadays
that.
is not like porn was when you and I were growing up. When you and I were growing up, it was magazines, and that was it. You might find one under your older brother's bed or your dad's wardrobe or whatever, and that was it. But now, there's pretty much anything you can ever imagine, and things you can't imagine, available now. And I think men, young men, older men, see it and think, "Gosh, this is not how I perform." And what are your thoughts on the role porn plays in almost in guiding as to how we should be as men?
Well, first of all, it's younger than that. It's younger than 11, 12. It's like,
Really?
yeah. I mean, kids will like Google something and that has nothing to do with porn, and porn will come up. So, I mean, there's no avoiding it. Unfortunately, if your kid has access to the internet, they're gonna come across something. But as far as older, I mean, college men are having the hardest time because what they're seeing is they're seeing things. They need more and more stimulation and racier things to get off. And then when they get into the real world with a partner, it's not like that. You cannot have that kind of performance. You cannot have that kind of sex with one person normally, or those kind of wild things. So that's one thing, and that their expectations, they need this. Their brain needs so much more stimulation, so they have an issue. I think once you lose your erection, you get in your head. I mean, it's happened to me as a woman. I'm sure it happens to men. And then it becomes, oh shit, I hope I'll be okay today. And so the next time becomes a little harder. The other thing to note is that men start to lose testosterone. 40% of men in their 40s have ED, 50 in their 50s, 60. I mean, most men will get erectile dysfunction at some point. You want to make sure that it's not a medical issue because the arteries to the penis are the smallest in the body, and they tend to clog first. So you could have a cardiovascular issue. You could have diabetes. There are a lot of medical things. There are medications that can cause it. SSRIs are a big one. And also, I think like you're not alone. Like everybody's going through it. It's just that nobody's talking about it. Oh yeah, and the other thing is that when men masturbate with a very tight grip, sometimes they call it a death grip. It'd be pretty hard to replicate that in a vagina. So
Unless you've done a lot of Kegel exercises.
yeah, exactly. I don't even think then. So that's the other thing that can make it difficult. But I'm finding it's super interesting. I'm finding a lot of the guys I date have if it's not ED, it's trouble ejaculating, and there's like a range of reasons. But do test your testosterone because that can be a simple fix. And that should be tested, by the way. You don't want to test it. You want to test it over time, like a few days, different times a day, because your testosterone levels fluctuate.
Yeah, we never think about that. Like you think of it not as being a medical thing. You think, oh, well, I'm just my age, and that's what it is. And it's as opposed to thinking, well, yeah, I mean, absolutely, which doesn't really feel like the way forward. But it's very interesting. I interviewed a director of ethical, and she called it holistic porn, a lady called Inka Winter. And she was fabulous. And I sort of watched some of the content she creates, and the difference between that porn and what you might call almost fast food porn, it's just the light years apart. They really, really are. And there's some porn that's beautiful. It's beautifully shot, and it's got an incredible story, and it's still hardcore sex. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's not just kissing and over the clothes action. It's just proper full-on sex, but it's just very, very different. And I do wish that was what people saw as porn, as opposed to the sort of clip factories that people tend to access, which I think are just, like you say, it's just not real life. And if anybody imagines that is real life, then talk to porn actresses or porn actors and find out what it's really like doing it. And a lot of them love what they do, but it's not filmed in a 5-minute slot and it's all perfect. It's filmed over 7 or 8 hours, and it's hard. It's camera angles. It's this. It's that. It's very, very difficult to film porn properly, I think.
There's another website which was created by Cindy Gallup, Make Love Not Porn, and the model there is it's real people having real sex. They film themselves. Every piece of content is reviewed. You sign consent forms, and you can. It's kind of the OnlyFans model where you put it up there, and then people subscribe to your channel. And she's having a hell of a time. They just took down her Instagram account because Meta's, especially female sex educators. But it's a really great site if you're to see real people, and she has people on every spectrum, from disabilities to kink to gay to straight to whatever. And the thing is, I mean, I've watched a bunch of it, and it's interesting. It's not quite as titillating as the other stuff. So I think if you can get your mind around the porn that is Pornhub, if you're going to watch it, it's like you're watching a movie. It's like when they show you a romance scene in a movie and you see them, they get into bed and they have simultaneous orgasms. Like, that's a movie.
Everybody do that?
Anyway, So
what are the things that you plan to do for the future? So, like I say, this is almost the latter part of your experience so far. So this is like a 10-year, 5-year journey. So what do you hope for the next 5-10 years?
Well, as long as I love what I'm doing, and I'm going to keep doing it. I'm expanding my programs. I'm expanding my speaking. The podcast is growing. My YouTube channel is blowing up, which I love, and I'm so excited to be able to teach people. And I want, my mission is that every person should have the best sex till they die. I don't care how old you are. Whatever sex looks like for you, you should feel free to keep having it and keep being curious. And that's how I am about life.
So would you say you're much more, the answer to this is obviously yes, but you're much more in tune with your own sensual self now? So I assume that the bullet vibrator wasn't the last vibrator that you engaged with.
Maybe. Yeah. So.
Yeah, nobody knows our pleasure better than we know it ourselves, but we just don't explore it.
Yes. Go learn your body. That's how you have the best sex, because then you can tell someone else how to manage it.
What's the one thing you would want people to know about sex when they're in their 50s and their 60s? What should we know?
That it's not over. There really is that it changes, and it's not going to be the same, and desire changes, and our bodies change, and how we have sex changes, but it doesn't mean that it has to end. And oh, by the way, it's good for your health, so just consider it medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'll put lots of links into the notes. There's a million places people can go and find out more about what you're doing, and you're doing some great things. And I think it's really, it's really nice that somebody's exploring sex for those of us that aren't in our 20s and 30s. And it'd be nice to explore more. So
Well,
thank you so much.
thank you
No,
for
pleasure,
having
absolute
me.
pleasure. No, real pleasure. So enjoy the rest of your week, and
Thanks.
thanks so much.
You too.